Welcome to the round 2 injury update brought to you by AIA Vitality. Pretty competitive game on Friday night, obviously. Round 1, a few bumps and bruises. That may affect some guys' availability early in the week and what they can get into from a football point of view, but we expect all but one, obviously, to complete the full training session towards the back end of the week and be available for the weekend. So our big talking point was obviously Jeremy Howe. He had that huge collision, marking contest, fell to the ground, and he did suffer a compound fracture of the forearm. So the fracture site was right in the middle of the forearm. He subsequently went off to hospital, had surgery on that, and had a couple of plates inserted. Medical staff at the ground on the night did a fantastic job, both Geelong medical staff, our own internal medical staff, and then the paramedics, to make Howe as comfortable as they could on the night. Rehab process from that at the moment, the time frame is a little bit unclear. We know in this first initial 2-week period that Howe is going to be pretty inactive, just making sure that the surgery settles down. He's got a lot of inflammation, a lot of swelling, a lot of soft tissue things going on. So it's really just getting Howe home and comfortable and around his family for a couple of weeks. And within the next fortnight, we'll be able to update on what time frame that may look like once he goes back and has follow-up with the surgeon. And we see how the wounds have healed and we see how the bones are starting to heal through that structure point. He'll get an X-ray around about the 6-week mark that may then suggest, do we progress or do we need to keep holding back? So time frame's a little bit unclear at the moment. We're hopeful that it's sometime around the bye, but we'll be able to update that further in the next couple of weeks. A couple of really positive news stories for us this week with Harvey Harrison and then both Finn McRae. I can group them together. They had that really big week of training last week, completed all the football skills and match play with the squad, and then completed a really decent rehab running session over the weekend. So they're in full training this week, and then assuming there's no hiccups, which we're really not expecting any because they've put in a really solid sort of 4 or 5 week block now, both those will be available for some game time on the weekend in the VFL program. Neither of them will be too limited, which is really, really good. We've been able to get a lot of running load into them, and so they'll be available for most of the game come this weekend in the VFL, and that should kickstart their in-season period where they can get into training and playing and then push for selection as they go through the season. Aiden Begg, he had a little issue in the VFL practice match on the weekend, so he went over for a ground ball and bent down to pick it up, and some of these taller blokes struggle with that action, so he had a little bit of a back spasm, tried to play through the game but then had some further pain and couldn't continue, so he was subbed out of the game at somewhere through the second quarter. Since had some follow-up scans, and look, there's a little bit going on there. It's nothing too sinister. He's had some medical interventions over the last 24, 48 hours. That'll make him unavailable for this weekend's game, but he should get in some running by the end of this week and then into team training next week, and whether he's available around 3 or 4, we're unsure yet, but Aiden Begg will be unavailable this week. And the other one's Arlo Draper. So we didn't mention him last week. He's been working through the concussion protocol. He had a concussion towards the back end of pre-season, right before the trial period's game, and he's just working through the AFL concussion protocol and making sure that we're crossing all of the T's and dotting all the I's as we go through that. The idea of that protocol is they're symptom-free all the way through, so it's around about a 7-stage return to play protocol where you just grade up the activity over those 7 stages. We know in the best case scenario it takes 12 days, but we need to wait till they're completely symptom-free before we progress through those 7 stages. So we're just going through that with Arlo at the moment. He's into running work, he's into skills work, ball work one-on-one with a rehab coach on the side, and he's really just holding in that phase until he's symptom-free there, and then we're progressing along. We're unsure on how long that'll take. We'll make sure we just go through that protocol as good as we can with Arlo over the coming couple of weeks. Krugs, we're starting to narrow down timeframes on Krugs now, so he's started to complete rehab, and we've done some follow-up testing on his shoulder strength, which is really, really good. At the moment he's got around about a 15% strength difference between one side and the other, and that's really, really good positive signs for this point in rehab, because we know we've got another 4 or 5 weeks before we progress him into full contact. So we're hoping that strength deficit, or we're expecting that strength deficit to come down and be quite even over the next fortnight. So he'll start doing team training now. He'll start running around doing ball work, non-contact skills, as well as some really high-level rehab where he's starting to get into some falling progressions, landing on that shoulder. So he's in a really, really good spot. The time frames are narrowing to around about round 7 or 8. So it's a really good positive step for Krugs over the last week, and we'll make sure that we get some really good running load and really good rehab into him over the next fortnight, and then be able to update on which one of those games he'll be available for. Lipinski, he's had a follow-up review with the surgeon just early this week. Able to come out of the sling now, which is really positive. So he's 2 weeks post-surgery now, able to come out of the sling. He'll be just doing light duties for the next couple of weeks, and then we'll be able to start some really good high quality rehab with him at around about the 4 to 6 week mark. And again, we're just going to update those timeframes as we narrow down and get closer to his return to train and return to play times. But really positive news for Patton. He's out of the sling and he's more comfortable moving around now. And then Charlie Dean's the final one. He's got a really key milestone coming up next week, which we'll be able to give a further update on, and that's a review with a surgeon and a follow-up CT scan to see how that bone in his foot is healing, and that'll determine whether he comes in and out of the boot. So it's status quo for this week with Charlie, but we'll be able to provide a further update next week with regard to how that's progressing in the first month of his rehab since surgery. And that's all for the round 2 injury update.